All right. So this is what I wanted to talk about. I saw this Reddit thread a few days back, but I was like in my grind, so I didn't want to talk about it yet. This is always the topic, right? Every offseason, you have the main topic of conversation. NA goes to Worlds, normally shits the bed. Everyone gets upset. Everyone questions why this happens. And then people that are in the scene or from other scenes start speculating as to why NA sucks. Now, I thought that this discussion was a really good one because you have Lyra, somebody who played in LCS for years, actually succeeded in LCS as well. Rigby, who is just a coach, so that's super updated, right? Like, he obviously was just here. He just coached a successful team. He was the coach of VG. You remember he was on Clutch and I believe Dignitas. He was on all those teams from season 7 to season 9, I believe. And then Cloud Templar is a Korean former pro player that is now a caster. So I thought that this was actually a really interesting discussion. I have my own reasons why I think NA sucks. I don't think that a lot of like the standard ones that everyone always applies to are still like super valid. I know one of them that people talk about is like 60 ping, but most of the facilities have like 45 now, which I think is pretty reasonable. It's not that far off what Europe plays with. And I mean, Europe has had significantly more success than NA. So I don't think that's one that people really need to be talking about, but I just wanted to go through this discussion and I'll add in like my mentality as to why, or like my reasoning as to why I think NA continues to struggle. Let's go into it. So apparently this video was an hour and 37 minutes long, so I'm just going to read the main translations and I'm going to like interject as I see fit as to where I think more things could be added or like problems that I've noticed from my participation, but then also just from talking to pro players and just listening to like the way that they discuss their full year. So I mean, I guess I'll start off with this. I'll start off with my first point here. I think that the main problem with LCS is not necessarily like things out of their control or work-life balance or any of that. I think that it's simply that you cannot find 5 players in North America that will fully commit to one team and improvement for a year straight. Like, it will never be for a year straight. There will always be, you'll always lose someone. There's always going to be someone who's going to develop another hobby or chase some random girl or have some issue where they just don't want to play the game anymore or they burn out. You'll never be able to get like 5 people, sit them down at the beginning of the year and be like, I need you to give me 11 months of like try hard. Like 11 months of you caring about the success of this team over anything else, over like other personal goals you might have, like just 11 months where you just dedicate yourself fully to this game. You're on top of patch changes. You're grinding day in and day out. Like you want to win more than anything. Like most of your time, like most of your conscious hours being awake, like you don't have to do the 24 hour, like you don't have to do some crazy schedule where you're just like not sleeping in order to be a competent pro player. You need to obsess over the game though. And like even when you're doing other things, you want to be like thinking about the game. You want to be like, you know, when you're just getting like into that mode where you just care more about something than anything else. When you're eating, you're like thinking about the game. You're like thinking, oh, like what about these champions? Like when you're showering, you're thinking like, oh man, like how sick would it be if like we pulled out this, or like maybe we could alter this part, or maybe we could like work on this aspect of our game. You're just obsessed with it, and I think that is like the most powerful thing when you just really care about winning. You know, and I feel like the most successful teams, they have this naturally. Like when the players go eat together, they're talking about the game. They're talking about new champions. They're talking about, oh, I kind of want to play this. Oh, what if I play that? Then maybe we could do this. Oh, this would be a sick strategy. Wait, you remember this old combo that people used to use? Well, now one of these champions is back in the meta. Why don't we just pull out that old combo? Like there's all those types of things that I think could be super valuable. So that's the number one thing that I think is the thing that hampers NA teams from being able to actually succeed, is you don't find 5 players that will give you 1 year. That will give you 1 year and not fall apart. Number 2, I think that there's an unreasonable expectation as to how improvement works within a team environment. When it's not met, makes people give up extremely quickly. So I think that most pro players, when you talk to them, they think that improvement is linear. They think that like you're going to start at point A. The first day is the worst you'll ever be. Then you'll get slightly better each day, right? Everyone always says that, right? 1% better each day. If you're 1% better each day, then like at the end of the year, you're going to be like 370%. Like, I mean, it's actually more than that because it's multiplicative, but you get the point, right? Like they're like 1% better each day. That's not how improvement works in League of Legends. You're going to get better, and then there's going to be a patch, and then you might get worse, or you'll try to work on one aspect of your gameplay. You're like, okay, guys, we're going to like focus on top dives. And then you focus on your top dives and, you know, you lose some games, you know, and then when you go back to normally like, okay, well, like maybe we should like ease off of that. Let's try something else. And then when you go back to like what your default standard way of playing the game is, you're somehow worse than that. And I think that really with North American pro players, they're not ready for like a ladder grind. Like even if you take somebody, right? Like let's say you take a leaderboard. This isn't like actual improvement, but you take somebody who's even like rank 1 in league, and you like tier graph them. Like it's gonna be like up and down. Like this is just gonna be how your progression is in almost anything. Even if you're super successful, right? That's just gonna be how your progression is. You're gonna get better. You're gonna get worse. You're gonna like have something happen. And you're gonna plateau, and then at some point while you plateau, you're gonna have a breakthrough. And when you have that breakthrough, that's when you like get to another level, and then that becomes your base level. So it's not that like you are now just consistently improving again. It's like you've consistently improved to a point, and then you plateau again, and then you might get worse, slightly better, worse, and you're gonna be in that grind, and it's gonna be mentally tough the whole time. And there's gonna be times where you're scrimming and you're gonna be like, why the do we even scrim? Like, dude, scrimming makes us worse. It's like, yeah, right now we like have gotten worse, but scrimming is not making us worse. We're just like, we're getting worse. And the other thing is it's comparative. It's not just like you're playing against a machine or something, where I feel like that same way of progressing would actually occur like in almost anything in life. You're competing against other people, so it might not even be that you're like worse than you were before. It might be that like other teams got slightly better, or other teams are improving faster than you. And I feel like these types of things, like because pro players are not mentally ready for this, it ends up f***ing up teams. It ends up destroying pro players' mentality. So those are two things off the top that I think really hurt NA pro players just from talking to them. Like they give up so fast, bro. They give up so fast. Like you'll scrim 2 days trying a new strat, and if it doesn't work, and you know it just seems like, oh well, these players can't play this game, it's done. Like you chalk it up. And part of that is because of the LCS season, right? The LCS season, you know, you have 4 days of scrims, game. 4 days of scrims, games. Like that's just the way that it is. So you feel kind of pressured to be, you know, band-aiding all the time. But at some point you have to realize, like, dude, 8 teams are fucking making playoffs at the end of this shit. At least in the old format, 8 teams are making playoffs. That fact alone, and the fact that you can't get relegated, should mean theoretically that you can put more time into actually trying to improve your team and not worrying about how's my individual performance looking? How am I looking compared to this guy? Am I going to get a bigger contract than this player that I think I'm better at in the end of the season? It's like all this fucked up shit that doesn't actually help you become the best team possible. Like you have to just value the team success above everything else if you want to be part of a successful team. So those are things that I wanted to talk about, because I haven't read all of this, but I thought that it would be interesting to go through. So that is where like my mentality is going into this, that these are the biggest problems to me. Okay, so NA head coach's perspective on NA struggles at Worlds. So let's just read it from the top. Cloud Templar introduces Rigby, former EG head coach for 2022, and Lyra played in LCS as jungler for 3 years, and also adds that they are somewhat free to talk whatever, since they're all going to the military soon. They're all the same age and they are friends. Okay, so they should be able to have a pretty candid discussion. Lyra, I think LCS dumped me first, implying that he could say whatever about LCS, but this is never said. Okay, so yeah, Lyra did get dumped, and also like the way that Lyra got dumped I thought was kind of weird, because from talking to people that were on his team at the time, all of Lyra's teammates really respected him. They were like, oh, this guy is really smart, he taught us the game. He was like the coach of their team really during like the clutch success. And even though he had that rapport within his team, he got like axed almost first. He got kicked out immediately. So if you talk to people that played with Lyra, you talk to Vulcan, you talk to Huni, you talk to Demonte, they all just had a ton of respect for this guy, and apparently NA just viewed him as not super valuable, or like that he's already taught these other players. Now they can go and bring the wisdom to newer players that are maybe more mechanically talented. Cloud Templar points out that there was only a single time NA made it to World Semis. Didn't need to point that out. I think about that all the time. Rigby, NA teams at Worlds in 2022 had no leisure to look out for each other. EG was different than other teams. EG tried early game comps. All the other teams stuck to late game scaling comps. Cloud Templar points out that LCS has done much better at MSI. LCS had some strengths during 2016 to 2019 at least. Rigby says, my team EG was simply trying to learn as much as possible. We expected to lose all scrims against LCK, LPL, and LEC. That's sad. Both at MSI and Worlds. That is crazy that a North American team, a team that went in as #1 seed from North America to MSI, or like obviously they're the #1 seed, they're the only team from North America, but a team that is considered to be one of the best in North America, top 3, whatever, at least at Worlds, is expecting to lose every single game versus LEC team. That's just, that's ridiculously low expectations. NA servers ping problem. Regular season Champions Queue has a ping of 8, but it was 30 during Worlds due to varying locations. It used to be 60 on NA server. There are pros that utilize it and some not. Those who don't blame the voice comms stressing them out after their scrims of the day. Champions Queue, there's a couple issues. The biggest issue with Champions Queue, from talking to a lot of the players, is they really hate the matchmaking. The skill-based matchmaking is just not accurate. Like, there's essentially just even if everyone's supposed to start at a like even slate, the fact that amateur players like are even in games with like top tier pro players is going to skew. It's going to be way more than whatever like the Champions Queue rating system is. And because these pro players care about like winning their games, they hate the experience of just like losing games. That's why a lot of them don't play Champions Queues. They will play with amateur players. Like, the game will feel doomed. It's like you're going into a solo queue game and it's like, oh, the other guy had, Summit in spring, and we've got this like amateur top who just started, who's like a fucking Riven one trick that is now trying to go pro. I know I just kind of like made it sound like General Sniper, but I wasn't thinking about General Sniper. I was thinking of a motherfucker named Meslo who keeps on inting me. But you have like, an amateur player is just learning pro versus somebody who's a top tier pro, and you go into that game and you feel like it's lost from the beginning, and then you play it out and your top's just getting stomped the whole time, and they just feel like the matchmaking is literally just worse in Champions Queue than in actual solo queue. And that's why people are playing solo queue over Champions Queue. They just really hate the matchmaking. Lyra, with NA solo queue, for some champs, you can't queue auto because it's so slow. In the morning, which is the peak time for Korean solo queue, there's nobody playing in challenger level games. This is because of work-life balance culture there. True. I can tell you that because like I have an account that's, bordering on challenger. And when I would queue up in the morning, like I would queue up after LPL sometimes, you're getting no one in your games, bro. Like, you're just getting, even if you're like high GM, you're getting just master tier games because there's like no challenger players playing. And a work-life balance and work ethic. I've heard that the introduction of Champions Queue has not really changed the amount of pros practice. Rigby. In scrims, the practice partner opposing team won't allow for redoing games that were decided too early to gain good practice. For example, if the enemy Silas gets 4 kills during a botched invade and LCK, the opposing team would agree. Wait, what's so funny is this is coming full circle. Let me finish I'll finish reading it and then I'll give my opinion so it's completely clear. For example, if the enemy Silas gets 4 kills during a botched invade and LCK, the opposing team would agree to redoing the game so that one game's practice won't be lost, but LCS teams refuse to redo. If this happens for 1 or 2 games, the scrim might end as early. I'm assuming this is going to be end. The scrim might end as early as 2:30 p.m., even though the usual scrim block is from noon to 5 p.m. I hate hearing. So you're telling me that there's days of scrims, because there's only like 4 days of scrims a week, right? It's 4 days of scrims, 1 off day, 2 days playing LCS. The 2 days that you're playing LCS is pretty You go to LCS, you have to be there like 2 hours early. You do makeup, you go to the person, you do hair and makeup, you chill out before like the game's a bit, you do your like tech check, then you go on stage, 15 minutes before, you play your game. After your game, you go do like fan stuff. You have interviews there at Riot. You have interviews with independent journalists and all that stuff. And then you normally go out for a team dinner. So like in a day where you play at like, let's say you play at 12:30, right? Your day from like 10 until 5 is going to be done. Like, you're just not going to be doing anything during those days. So if you take multiple days like that, and then you also have days where you're only like, you have a day off, and then you have days during the week where you're only scrimming 2.5 hours. That is fucking ridiculous. But it's pretty funny that Rigby makes this point, because for a while, this was considered like something that people would use to shit on NA. They're like, look, if a Silas gets 4 kills during a botched invade, you should play the game out. Because like, what happens if that happens in a real game? How are you going to overcome this if this happens in a real game? What are you going to do? How are you going to adjust? Like, you got to learn how to adapt on the fly, and there's going to be these things. And that was one of the main criticisms that people used against LCS. So it's funny when you've existed in the scene for so long that now people just hit you with like both sides of the argument. It's like, why does NA suck? NA sucks because they remake too much. Then like 10 years down the line, it's like, no, NA actually sucks because they don't remake enough. It's like, bro, I feel like this, it's just a balancing act, right? Like, you have to just be able to gauge how bad the situation really is. Did this guy get like 4 kills at level 1, and now you have a Silas that, and like he started a Dark Seal, now you have a Silas that has Hextech Alternator, Corrupting Potion, and Darksteel with 8 stacks starting the game and the game's already over. Like, if it's something like that, sure, right? Like, then you remake the game. If Silas gets like 1 kill or something, though, like, probably don't remake the game. I think that you just have to be reasonable. You have to try to, like, not be emotional. And this should generally come from your coaching staff to be able to gauge how bad the situation actually is in the game. Is it playable? Is it not? And, like, are we wasting time? Or are we actually, you know, testing our resiliency and we're actually learning how to play from behind? Yeah, and then obviously, like, you should just keep on playing games until 5 p.m. You should play 5 hours worth of games. So even if, like, you FF a game, it shouldn't be like, oh, well, that's one of the 5. It's like, why do you need to only... It's like, it's these random rules that LCS teams have created for themselves that then they hold themselves to as if it's God's word. It's the same thing that Riot does, where they create, like, a system, and then, like, the system is flawed, but they won't adapt the system because they made the system originally. It makes no sense, right? Like, you don't have to only play 5 games. Like, your goal of practice is to get better. So you should just be playing as much as you can within a period that makes sense, so players aren't like, so it doesn't become destructive to your team. You should just be playing as many games as you can in order to get solid practice where you actually feel like you're improving. The goal is to improve. So if you're supposed to play 5 games, I mean, the reason why it's 5 games is because if each game is like a 30-minute game, and then NA teams are taking 20 to 30 minutes like for review, and then maybe you take like a 15-minute break in between like the 3rd and 4th game or something, so you know you can reset a little bit. Because if a team loses 3 games at the beginning, maybe they're getting tilted, take a 15-minute break, everyone chill out, go back, hit game 4, game 5. The reason why it's supposed to be 5 hours is so that you can get 5 games. So that is what the goal of practice should be. It should be to just like play a reasonable amount of time together as a team each day. And it seems like people just view it as like, no, we only have to play 5 games of scrims. And the other thing that I've realized that like most pro players just want scrims to be over. They view it as like school. You know, like when you're in school and you're like, man, we get out at like 3:00 and you're a kid and you're looking up at the clock and you're like, oh, it's 2:45. Like, okay, 2:50. Like, okay, it's almost nice. 3. All right, 3. We're out. And then you just leave school. That's how pro players view scrims. They just can't wait for it to be over. And so a lot of these pro players aren't doing it from like a good standpoint. Like they're not ending at 2:30 because they think that that's like the best way to improve. They're doing it because they want to just do other shit. Like, oh, like we can end, and then I can go get some food, go to the gym. Like, all right, cool. Like we can come back, play some like solo queue after. They don't actually care about the improvement. It's coming from a super bad place. Cloud Templar. So they only do exactly 5 games of scrims, not 5 games worth of scrim practice. Yep, EG had impact on other players who have good work ethic. So we always went for asking for redos, but teams kept refusing. So sometimes we ended up arguing, saying, you guys are bottom tier anyways. If you guys are gonna practice like this, what's the point of scrimming? You guys are gonna be dead last place anyway, so don't practice and go party. I respect that. Cloud Templar. All right, so EG was an exception. I've definitely heard that teams with Korean coaches and players are definitely much better. By the way, forgot about disclaimer. These are simply our personal opinions, even though we've all been wait, hold on. Skip for some reason. We've all been to NA and known LCS. I talked to a lot of LCS players for this video, and I've heard from everyone that Korean coaches and players are really different. True, but I mean, I experienced the opposite. I literally experienced the opposite when I was competing. The person that wanted to end scrims or not scrim the most was Piglet. Like, Piglet and Phoenix wanted to just play solo queue the most. They wanted to just take days off scrimming and just play solo queue. They said solo queue is like the best for like just improvement, like just improve your mechanics. Like, I did not feel like this was the culture. But then again, like, this is obviously a personal anecdote, which is similar to what they're doing. I mean, they're just giving personal anecdotes. And I've heard that like Piglet was different than most Koreans, and part of the reason why he was actually kicked off T1 in season 4 was because he like didn't have the work ethic that they wanted. Like, he had a grind work ethic in terms of solo queue, but the team work ethic wasn't there. The scrim schedule's 5 game 1 block since LCS is BO1. So they match the on-stage game schedule with the scrim schedule. This leads to team scrimming, and then the better teams usually win the first 3 and then slacking off, trying out wild useless picks in the last 2 games. I've personally experienced the wasteful games in scrims because of this. Cloud Templar says, practice is simply scrim plus solo queue. And I heard that there are pros that don't play any solo queue at all. Is that true? Definitely. There are ones that play a lot of solo queue, but some of them that don't play solo queue at all. We tried to get intel on players by looking at their solo queue match history, but sometimes we can't because they literally have no solo queue games. Reacting to the chat, you guys are bringing up Barrel as LCK Pro that doesn't play solo queue, but LCK is different. We do 3 game scrims twice a day. This is on a different level. Players do solo queue to rest after scrims. I mean, this isn't that much different. This is what the format was when I was a pro. Like the whole time that I was a pro, from season 1 to season 6 when I retired, it wasn't even 3 games. It was 3 hours, right? Like you wake up at 11 or like 10. Well, I mean, it depended, right? When in season 4, when we lived in a team house and we practiced at the team house, you'd wake up at 11, do like some light review or just like a light discussion about like what you want to practice for the day, or maybe like a review of some of the games you played over the last weekend for LCS, maybe reviewing the games for the team that you're about to play. And then at 12, you had a block. So you did 12 to 3, and then there was a 1 hour break, and then you did 4 to 7. And then if you triple blocked, and we started triple blocking a lot towards playoffs because TSM was the best team in the region at the time. I know for like newer fans, they're gonna be like, what? Like how is that possible? Yeah, but they were. Bjergsen was like the GOAT, and they were doing triple blocks. So they would do an 8 to 10 block. So they would do like 3 games, 1 hour break, 3 games, 1 hour break for dinner, and then 2 games. That was their schedule. We started mimicking that. So there was scrim days that we did 8 hours. There was also days where I would help the academy team play because Dardoch was having problems like adjusting to the academy team. So there were days where I would scrim 2 blocks, and if my team wasn't triple blocking, I would go and do a last block with the academy team, like so that I could communicate with the team and they could watch like how an LCS player would play in academy and learn from it or whatever. So this used to be standard in NA. I don't know why we started practicing less. Well, I know why we started practicing less, but the reason we started practicing less is just a stupid reason. They're like, well, G2 is practicing less, and they're the best team that the West has ever produced. They're doing the 5 games, so we should do the 5 games. That was our mentality as to like why NA wanted to like mimic the G2. That's like if you looked at a team like the Chicago Bulls and you're like, well, Dennis Rodman is going to Vegas after games, skipping practice, like doing a ton of drugs and having sex with like random hookers. Like we should do that too, because that'll make us a better like I don't understand like why you have to copy. Just because a team is more successful than you doesn't mean that their practice is better. They could just be better players. LCS pros say they don't want to do voice comms or they don't want to get stomped, etc. Yeah, they keep making excuses. Isn't that just saying they don't want to practice? Yep. Cloud Templar, in Korea, if a player says he doesn't want to practice, the coaching staff just kicks them out. But in LCS, the player can instead kick the coach out for calling him out. Apparently, this is quite common. This is unimaginable in Korea. Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like culturally also like Korea has the thing where, I mean, all the coaches are going to be older than the players and you have to like respect your elders and things like that. But I mean, there's just more of like a scarcity of talent in North America. I mean, if you're paying a player $2 million a year, right? And, now they have a good contract. Now they have good agents. And that money is like guaranteed whether they play in LCS or Academy. And they just like are being a little about it. But you don't, like, that your team gets worse if you kick them. What do you do? Like the reason that Korea can do that is because they have such like a wealth of talents that are close enough in skill set where they can replace pretty easily and not see enormous downgrades. Rigby says the goal should be better performance, but even the better coaches in LCS go for simply showing off his knowledge. In Korea, post-game feedbacks are done by looking at the game as the players looked at it in-game, but in LCS, post-game feedbacks are done with even opponent's vision turned on, so no fog of war, and the coach would blame the player for getting caught when the feedback should be, we should have put vision there so we don't get caught. This is not the way to do feedback. That's actually a really good point. I think that this is something that coaches should adapt to. Personal perspectives is really broken. Like now you have all those apps. Like I use Outplay. I use my own personal perspective when I play solo queue so I can go back and watch how I played things, right? Using personal perspectives and using fog of war is really good. And I was thinking about this yesterday because a lot of the times when you're coaching teams, like you're coaching in this like when you talk to people, they're coaching in this ideal sense, but it's a game of imperfect information. So like understanding like the mental game of like, oh, you've cleared this team's vision, so like now watch like how they're going to contest. Like there's a bunch of rules in League of Legends that you can break if the enemy team doesn't have the vision and the confidence to make the counter play on time. So for example, here's one of the most basic examples of a rule that you have in League of Legends. Like don't go bot when Baron is up. Don't send a lot of people bot when Baron is up. but there's multiple ways you can break this rule, right? If you have vision on Baron and you're stronger than them, and they have like a split push threat in the side lane, you can send your solo laners both there, and they have TP, so you can answer like the counterplay on Baron. Furthermore, if the enemy team doesn't have vision, they're not going to know that you're going bot and killing bot lane until you've actually started hitting him. So like, have you ever been in one of these solo queue games where, you know, your Trinimir's pushing bot, but you're way weaker as a 4-man, and you can't walk up, and then you suddenly just look at the map and there's like 5 people on the Trinimir, and you're like, oh, like, okay, we can go Baron, and then you start walking to Baron, but by the time you get to Baron and you start hitting it, the Trinimir's already fucking dead. You have people rotating across the map, and you're just not able to actually like kill the Baron in time. A lot of these situations are like viewed through an ideal sense, where if you're doing it with Fog of War off, you're going to be looking at the situation being like, oh, but they could just go Baron here. But they're never, like, teams are not going to just walk and start doing Baron and have the read of a lifetime without any vision. Like, League of Legends is a game where people make sense. There's not that many like mind games in League of Legends. So being able to like use vision to your advantage and then like make decisions knowing that your opponent can't make an optimal decision because of the vision is actually really important. Okay, org setting goals too low. Okay, Cloud Templar, there's this atmosphere that we don't have to do well, but we only need to maintain in LCS. Well, this is the thing, dude. This was partly created by franchising. The biggest thing that would motivate pros to not be in previous years, and the reason why I think old pros used to try harder, is because everyone was scared. Number one, you made way less money, right? So you didn't have like the security of, yeah, I'm making a couple $100,000 a year. Oh, I'm making $300,000-$400,000. If I do poorly and I get kicked from LCS for a year, I could like still live for a year and, you know, grind and then maybe come back the year after. There was none of that before. It was like, if we suck, we're getting fucking relegated, and then we fucked up our entire lives because we have foregoed years of schooling in order to try to be pro players, and we haven't made enough money to actually make it worthwhile. So we need to actually make this continue to work so that we can have careers in the future within this space. And now like people make so much money that like they can just go back and chill. They don't have that like, they don't have that fear of relegation, bro. They don't have the fucking night terrors where they wake up, oh Jesus, I thought we got relegated. Oh my God, I thought we were getting relegated. Oh my God, that was just the LMQ series. Oh, it's just that we didn't make Worlds. We didn't get relegated. Thank God. Anything but relegations. Like, they need that fear, bro. They need to be in that constant state of panic and dread that we were when we were pro players. Sometimes I say things really seriously that are sarcastic, and I really know that there's going to be some people that just don't realize, and they're going to take it for my word. I'm going to have a Reddit thread. Lyra, there are not many good players. If those players are already taken, the bottom tier teams can only do so much. They still got to brand their teams, and they don't do this. They don't do this. So they don't go for rookies and rather just the status quo with somewhat popular players. I don't even think that's true though. Like, when you look at like the dog teams, let's go like, you know, Golden Guardians this year. Who else was in dog tier? Dignitas, Immortals. Like, they didn't have popular players on those teams. Like, they didn't have popular players. That was like kind of an older thing where people would go for like these pros. Now everyone they just put in players that they know aren't ready or aren't actual viable LCS players, and they just say, oh, well, we're just developing them. That's the new thing. Now everyone is just developing everyone, but they don't actually care about development. All these orgs are just so full of shit, man. TSM, Golden Guardians. Look at the TSM thing recently. Oh, we're developing Soul. Like, we think Soul can be a top laner for the future of TSM. He's super raw now. We'll give him some LCS time. He's like in all of our things. Like, we're promoting him on our like on our content pieces, all this stuff. And then he's like, hey man, like, can I have a livable wage? They're like, no, 60K or get the out. Now, before we go any further, this is not because of the FTX thing, dude. People talk about it like, well, of course, bro. The FTX deal fell through. They only made $40 million over the last dude. They made $40 million over the last 2 years. They can afford to pay him 80K, 100K. They could afford to pay him that amount of money. They always boast about how they're the only profitable LCS org, right? Isn't that the thing that TSM consistently boasts about? Like, every other org is losing money except for us. Like, we make money. We are fucking money. That's their thing. Okay, so then pay your fucking player that you actually think could be like a franchise player, if that is what you think, which it's not. You just wanted to say that because it sounds a lot better than like, oh, we don't really give a that much anymore, so we're just like kind of promote it. We're just throwing shit at the wall and seeing what sticks, right? They could easily pay him 80K, 100K, have him be a franchise player, keep him in academy for a year, you know, see how he develops. Like, they could easily do that. They can't. It's not. They offered him 60K, which is barely livable in LA, by the way. Especially, it's not just LA, because people will be like, no, you can live in LA like for cheaper. The problem is, if you're gonna live in LA and you're gonna be close to like where everything is, you want to be close to the LCS facility, you want to be close to the TSM facility, like you're pretty much gonna have to live in Santa Monica. And Santa Monica is super expensive. I lived in an 1,100 square foot apartment, and it was like pretty nice, right? Like I could have found one for cheaper, but like to live in a nice 1,100 square foot apartment, 1,100 square feet, it's not much. I mean, let me get the conversion for European viewers. It's like 102 square meters. That's nothing, bro. Like that's not that much room. That was like for 2 people. And that cost me 4.5 to like 5K a month. It went up while I was there. It's probably even higher now. It might be as like high as like 5.56K a month. Like, dude, you're paying like 4K a month for rent if you're living in that area near the facility, like near the facilities, because Santa Monica is one of the most expensive cities in LA. So it's completely f***ed, bro. It's completely f***ed. They don't care, dude. That's just the thing they say. Listen to everything that these teams say and then watch what they do. Oh, what do we do? Oh, Golden Guardians. What do we do? Oh, we're investing in our talent, bro. We're developing our players. Where the f is Iconic? Where is Niles? Where is Newbie? Where are these guys, bro? Where are any of these guys? Because they're nowhere near LCS anymore. And those were the people that you were developing. So if in 2 years they go from like they're super raw and they're like developing, after 1 year, all of them were f***ing gone, bro. What? They're all gone in 1 year? Oh, so you weren't developing them at all. If you're not going to give them 1 year, then you're not developing, right? Developing is not a thing that is done. You don't go from collegiate player to top tier LCS player in 1 year. Most players that become really good spend like a year, like a year training, then a year in academy, and then they become good afterwards. So it's just the new it's just the new thing that LCS teams do. They love to say development. That's their way of saying, oh, we have shit players that that we got that we think maybe could be good, but we don't really care that much if they are or they're not, because we don't want to spend money. And if they're bad, then we'll kick them. That's development in North America. NA League popularity falling. Not many ranked users in NA server. High elo is too many one tricks with strange picks, so very bad practice. Maybe. Cloud Templar shows peak viewership data, including LPL, showing LFL, LVP, CBLOL, VCS, all beating LCS. Peak viewership. The average is way higher for LCS, but maybe the peaks are that high. The average is still way higher for LCS, which I think is actually a better number to use when you're talking about like viewership going down. Just use the average. So I mean, LCS viewership is going down, but it's not. I mean, this is like a way to make it seem way more drastic than it is, right? It's a way to make it seem like LCS less popular than LFL. It's not actually less popular than LFL on average. It's just when K Corp is playing their fucking stage event, their like one like K Corp event versus like another streamer team. I think it was Solari or whatever. It's like that match is gonna have a ton of viewers, but the average is not that high. NA coaching staff has no power of feedback and review. I'll use EG as an example. Even though we are not a typical LCS team, we were scrimming MSI teams, and then we went back to NA and started scrimming. We kept stomping lanes that we were supposed to lose. It made no sense. The opponent kept making mistakes and handing us games. Because of this low quality scrims, I was grateful to get one good game to do a feedback on per day. Templar, I heard that even coaching staff feedbacks are often ignored by the players. Rigby says, I talked to a lot of LEC people too, and apparently they're similar to LCS in that coaching staff sometimes just don't know the game well, so players might just talk amongst themselves. I mean, I think that's kind of fine. I think the value of a coach is to keep your own team's thoughts organized, like in a way. I know it sounds bad, but realistically, that is something that is really, really powerful. It's like, okay, even just having like a transcript of what was said after each game so that you're making sense and you're not like wildly all over the place with your conclusions. I think that's super powerful. And then also reminding players what they already know, because players will play one game, they'll be super emotional afterwards, they'll come up with like a million problems, and it's like, wait, hold on, we already know the solution to these problems, we just didn't apply it here. Just keep this in your mind, like refreshing pro players on the knowledge that they've even, like, they might tell you something and then you remember it and then you tell it back to them when they need to hear it. That is fucking valuable as a coach. It's not always good to have more powerful coaches. I think that's correct, since League is a game where coaches can't intervene while the game is being played. On top of that, a lot of LCS coaches are all about showing off and not about constructive feedback. Yeah, I mean, that's That's the main goal, right? A coach is not there to prove how fucking smart he is, which is what a lot of coaches try to do. The coach is there to make the team as functional as possible. It's like they're there to fix problems, fix the problems of the team. The team has problems. What are reasonable solutions that are going to be like achievable by the team? Like, where can you take the pressure off certain players in certain aspects and put them onto other players that can handle them? Like, how are you going to like divvy up like all the responsibilities that are going to be needed to be a successful League of Legends team? I heard that Reaper is an exception to this. He's the only exception. Okay. Hard to have a good new rookie. Cloud Templar. Any reason for the lack of rookies? Rigby. There are rookies. LCS coaches are not very good. Academy coaches can't be better than them. Cloud Templar. League is a 5-person game, so it's easy to just do politics well and appear good. Recognizing a good player is also a very important and hard to get skill. I heard it's pretty hard to debut as a rookie there. No, if you're on a bottom tier team, it's easy, but if it goes like this, player debuts because he was good at carry top champions at the academy level, and then they end up not being able to play neither carry top nor tanks at the LCS level, and then they get demoted again. Yep. Yeah, I mean, that's a huge problem. How do you actually fix that? I think a good example of this was Lorlo when we originally got him for LCS, because he came straight from like solo queue, right? And it was like, okay, you're known for being like this Fiora player, and Fiora is really broken right now. This is when Fiora was reworked, and it was actually just super OP. But Lorlo could play the lane phase. He did not know how to like play the map and split push originally, so he didn't know how to like leverage his advantage. And back then, split pushing was a lot different. Like, if you were playing a champion like Fiora, you would have enough lifesteal in your kit where you could like chunk the turret and then like take like half your health and then lifesteal to full life off one wave. Especially the builds that people were doing were like Ravenous Hydra. Death Dance used to like heal you on autos. It used to have like a lifesteal component of it as well. And then people would go like BT, so it'd be triple lifesteal, and you would just like chunk the turret to like 20%, like while the other top laner was hitting you. Then you'd back off, heal off the wave, and then you'd go and you'd do the same thing again. But because he didn't know how to like split push and then also keep in mind like where the rest of the map is, people just didn't want to like go through that process. Like, people don't want to wait for somebody else to improve. They'll just be like, you're not good at this, so we can't do this. That is like the most common LCS mentality. It's not like, oh, you're good at this, but you're bad at this. Can we improve at the thing that you're bad at, like in a reasonable time frame? It's just like, no, you're bad at that. So like, go work. It's like, go magically become better at that, and then maybe we'll like try again. You know, where it's like, I mean, at some point as a team, you have to be able to dedicate team time in order to improve a single player's issues, but no one wants to do that, right? Work-life balance and high pay. Cloud Templar. We're going all over the place and hard to summarize, but is it just work-life balance issue? NA doesn't pay little. Looks like they are reducing wages for next year, but it's still pretty high. The lowest I heard was $75K a year. Rigby says, for how bad LCS is, it doesn't spend enough to attract players that are truly good. Okay, Rigby, Jesus. Org's defeatist mindset is the problem in terms of international performance. Rigby, I wish LCS teams strive towards actually doing well at Worlds instead of just going for making Worlds. I told EG players to try to play differently to prep for Worlds, but when I did that, the management hated me for it. They told me to just focus on making Worlds. I mean, I guess it's kind of understandable from both sides, because you want to like improve and be the best team possible so that you're able to compete at Worlds. But what happens if you like it doesn't click in time and then you end up being Team Liquid? What happens if you just end up being Team Liquid and you don't even make it to Worlds? You have like the star-studded roster, it doesn't even end up making it there because you're spending so much time like trying to like figure out how to play optimally. It's pretty tough. I was really stressed about that. I was telling EG players that if we play like this, it doesn't matter if we make Worlds or not. We're just going to get eliminated in groups. Next day, GM comes to me and orders me to play Azir and Scale. He also says, all that matters right now is to make Worlds. To that, I don't have anything to say. I was just sad. Wait, who is the GM of Evil Geniuses? That's Andrew Barton. Isn't he like a gold player? Or Andy Barton. Sorry, Andy Barton. So some guy who's like not related to League at all ends up just coming in and telling him what champions to play into Scale. That's what he's saying. I would say I respect it, but I kind of can't even respect that. And I respect everything, bro. GMs at LCS have no idea what League is, don't you think? I also experienced this in 2019 as a player at LCS. I was in Europe for Worlds and worried about not being able to play at Worlds finals because of military issue. They said, don't worry about Paris. I mean, that to be honest, that is pretty base. Be honest, bro. You made it here with clutch. Like, we are going 0-6. Our group is Fnatic, T1, and RNG, man. We're going 0-6 and we're going home. Don't worry about going to fucking Paris. Come on, man. Is the only solution a super team that also performs internationally about imports, e.g. money? So only a super team that somehow does well at Worlds, the only solution. He previously mentioned G2 bringing LEC's level up with their international performances. Rigby says, with EG at Worlds this year, I felt like our laning was good. We solo killed JDG bottom and all, but we couldn't finish out those games because we never played early game comps in LCS. We just didn't know how to play it. None of jungle, mid, AD carry, and support was able to time enemy jungle camp spawns for invades, so it didn't work. Ooh, that's tough. That's tough. I was telling them we can do much better if we practice this for next year. I won't be with them because of military service, but I think all the players that played for EG this year will do well. Damn, it sucks. I mean, that's really tough. Like, not being able to, like, just time your invades, like, you know, like knowing when enemy camp spawns and being able to play for enemy camps and then, like, choking them out. That's something that's pretty hard to do. And honestly, with a lot of, like, these stat tracking apps and stuff, if people play with, like, the UGG app and stuff, and then you go on stage and, you know, you don't have that you're playing solo queue with apps, which I see a lot of like pro players actually are doing. Yeah, I mean, it kind of just does everything for you, so it's kind of fucked, to be honest. I mean, it's one of those things where you just always assume that somebody else can do it, and you don't view it as valuable enough. Like, most pro players don't view it as valuable enough that they want to work on it themselves. I experienced this a lot more in the early days of League because, I mean, as you guys know, Dragons, or as some of you may know, Dragons, buffs, all this stuff, they weren't timed in the game. Like, you couldn't just press tab and be like, oh, Dragons in like 5 minutes or like 3 minutes. You know, like, now they put that in the game because they were tired of people not showing up to the dragon fights and things like that. But in early days of League, you had to do this as a team. And I remember, like, in season 4, it's like, wait, how do we not know when Dragon is spawning? Guys, we don't even know when their buffs are spawning. How can we not know when their buffs are spawning? How do we know to play for something when we don't even know that it's there? It's tough, man. It's hard to, like, it's really hard to retrain pro players to, like, add things to their game. Just look at target champion only, right? That's the one that I always harp on, is people don't use target champion only when they're diving, when they're around minion waves and things like that. It's just people just don't. It's so hard for them to break that habit and create a new habit. What do you think about getting rid of import rules across all major regions? Rigby, I think it could work to just import whole teams like all of Saigon Buffaloes to NA, since they will be paid a lot more than they are in Vietnam, and they have the work ethic. Heard that one of the LCS teams is trying to make all Korean speaking team, which is TL. It is a pretty big blow to LCS that TL spent big this year and they didn't even make Worlds. This is kind of off topic, but LCK this year spent so big that we didn't do well this year, that if we didn't do well this year at Worlds, it would have been a crisis. Yeah, I mean, Gen G was like a super team. Well, it's weird, right? Because the teams that spent so big didn't actually do as well as you'd expect. Like, I mean, DRX couldn't have been one of the highest spending teams. I refuse to believe that. I mean, maybe they spent a lot on like Beryl and Deft, but like, I mean, Zika is definitely cheaper than Chovy, for example. So something a little more uplifting with NAT's first team. Okay, so these are all their all-time first teams. Everyone has Impact. Rigby has Inspired. I like that. Lyra has himself. Cloud Templar has Smithy. All of them have Jensen. All of them have Double Lift. And all of them have Core JJ. Okay, I don't really care about that. Conclusion and Q&A and random stuff. NA got much better at flanking. Impact is the only one who can really flank. And then Jojo Pian debuted, and we were working on his flanks all year. We figured this out, and we did well thanks to it. I've been really curious, but why was Fudge spamming Fiora at Worlds? No idea. Then who knows? He likes the champ. There was also a highlight reel where he TP'd mid and used Gore Drinker and then carried. I guess he felt good about that afterwards. Dude, I mean, like, Fiora is a broken champion, and it's really fucking good in lane, and it can lane against anything as long as you're, like, proficient at it. And, I mean, Fudge played against a lot of NA players and probably shit on them with Fiora. Is what it is. He was doing really well with it domestically. I still think LCS is a major region. They still beat all the minor regions. Chat, is there a phrase you'd prep for LCS winning Worlds? No, because I start prepping when it comes up. When it's coming up, I usually prepare when there's one series left. Rigby, LCS super team that actually does well internationally can happen. I could see the possibility. Yeah, I mean, I can see the possibility too, but it's kind of like an art. It's not like a we're working towards something possibility. It's just, you're just hoping that something just clicks. You know, that's how LCS doing well at an international tournament happens. You're just hoping for like a G2 effect. I mean, to be honest, in Europe, there's a higher chance of it happening because there's better average players. But it's the same type of feeling. Like, you don't go into things like, oh, this team is getting better and better and they're going to work harder and then they're going to eventually become like the best team in the world. Like, there's not a progression that you can see. It's just, you're hoping that they just like, you just put this shit into a pot and it just sparks, like instantly, just boom, there it is. And then they talk for 30 minutes that I couldn't really get to. That's the end. Hope you like my translations. I tried to get the point across without taking them out of context. Yeah, I think it was good. I think this was a good post. Well done. Well done. Base Dom1 fan. Well, I gave my own thoughts at the beginning and we went through it. Tried to give my thoughts throughout. I think this was a pretty good summary. Good information coming from Rigby. I mean, it's crazy to me that a general manager would ever interject into like a team's strategic gameplay. That is mind-blowing. That to me was the craziest thing that came out of this discussion between Rigby, Cloud Templar, and Lyra is Rigby stating that the general manager came in and told him what champions to play. Like, and not only champion to play style. Like, pick a Zero and scale, bro. What?